We welcome you today to our video Bites of Bread here at St. John Lutheran Church in the town of Center. Been ever watching the news and you hear of somebody who got too close to the edge of a cliff and tragically they fell? You think about that, you always in your mind say, why did he get so close to the edge? And yet people are kind of prone to that. Some have that desire for adrenaline rushes. Some maybe are just careless. Maybe some are just lazy, and maybe just some have bad luck. You think about that from a spiritual point of view, how many people walk right on the edge of falling away or falling into sin? That's what the Apostle Paul is reminding us of. And as we think about his letter to the Corinthians, you think about that. We think sometimes we're standing so firm we could never fall. But God reminds us through the Apostle Paul, be careful. The devil is around, sin is around, and we might fall into sin, or even worse, into unbelief. Listen as Paul writes to his fellow believers in the city of Corinth. All these things that were happening to them had meaning as examples, and they are written down to warn us to whom the end of the ages has come. So let him who thinks he stands be careful that he does not fall. Paul was writing this, and he used as an example the people of Israel from the Old Testament. You might say, well, that was only old history, or that was way long time ago, or the world was way more wicked back then. And yet you think about the people of Israel. How many times many of them were killed because they fell away and God punished them, and tens of thousands lost their life. And you saw that repeated. You saw that repeated with the people of Israel. You saw that repeated as they wandered in the wilderness. You saw that as they grumbled and complained. They thought they were standing firm, and in a way they were beginning to fall. Some people ask, why do we have a Bible? Or why should I read the Bible? Or what is the importance of the Bible? And certainly in the Bible we find God's way to heaven, and that is the most important part of God's Word. But secondly, it stands as an example or a warning. Those people in the Old Testament, God's people, they knew God's Word just as we did. They had the promises of God just like we did, and yet they walked really close, we might say, to the edge of falling into sin. And what happened? At times they began to fall. So I ask you, what is the status of your faith life? I suppose most of you listening would say, my faith is pretty firm, pretty solid, standing on firm foundation of Jesus. And yet just take a peek at your life. What is the thing in your life that maybe you have forgotten that is putting you very close to the edge of falling into sin, or even worse, into falling away from faith? Is it sports? Sports that you and your children take part in every weekend. And you might say, well, Pastor, that's just my enjoyment, or it's just my kids trying to get a little better, or my kids getting ready for high school or college sports. That's true. But what about church on Sunday morning? Which is more important? Be careful that you don't fall. What about your job? That job is important. It pays the bills. It pays for your medical things. It pays for your house. It pays for your food. What if that job makes you work every Sunday? What if that job is a temptation to do things that are not pleasing? Then you look back to the Old Testament Israelites and you say you're just like them because you latch onto the things of this world. We talk about church attendance, and God doesn't take church attendance, but how many times do we think God doesn't really care, or God doesn't really notice? I've been to church at least a couple times this last month, or the last couple months. And yet we try to think about, why do we come to church? Why do we come to Bible class? Why do we open our Bibles? Why do we have Sunday school? You think about it, because how many of us, as we sit and listen to this, we spent those couple years in confirmation class. Your pastor thoroughly taught you the things of God's Word. At the end of those couple years, you stood in front of the church and pastor put a white gown on you, and you said your words that I will remain faithful to the end. Except how many times have we dug back into God's Word to strengthen that faith which was beginning? And maybe the other side would be, how many times have we thought we were standing so firm? I was confirmed. I belong to St. John Lutheran Church. God, you don't have to worry about me. If I had a nickel for everybody I bump into that sometimes has started to fall, and I say, where are you at? And the response back is pretty common. It happens just about always. Pastor, don't worry about me. I know Jesus. I pray a lot. I am set. And with that in mind, we ask God to keep us safe so that we don't fall into temptation. God's blessings.